and welcome to the premiere edition of Retro Wrestling Game Spotlight. I'm your host, Lex G, and with me, as always, is Matt Riley. How you doing tonight, Matt?
It is a premiere edition.
It sure is.
I'm feeling very premiere.
And you should. So guys, just to give you a little background on what we're doing, much like the NWA 1983 project, we're going to talk about various promotions throughout the wrestling world, from old school promotions like the AWA to modern promotions like Evolve and PWG. And you will see a visual representation of those promotions on the screen using the WWE 2k17 engine and a lot of creative wrestlers and so on and so forth. So I'm really excited about this show. It's been in the works for quite a while at this point, so it should be real interesting and real fun. So on the very first show, we're going to talk about ECW, Extreme Championship Wrestling. So Matt, I have one question for you. Are you ready to bring it to the extreme?
I sounded, don't I? I am. I was waiting for some kind of intro. I didn't expect that intro. Oh my God!
Amazing. So guys, I could sit here and go over the history of ECW, but there are a lot of other resources for that. So if you want to learn about the full history of ECW, you can watch such things as the Rise and Fall of ECW, the Paul Heyman DVD, Forever Hardcore. And there's actually a series right now going on highspots.com. It's almost like a weekly series where they go over some of the histories of ECW. And there's also a great timeline series on kayfabe commentaries, also going over literally a week-by-week breakdown of ECW. But for this show, we're just going to give you our thoughts, our opinions, our hopes, and our dreams, because I find that more interesting.
All right.
But in fairness, I will give you a brief overview of the history of ECW. It was started in 1992 by Todd Gordon, and again, it was a kind of reboot of the Tri-State Wrestling Alliance that was owned by Joel Goodhart. That started in 1989, that went out of business. At that point, Todd Gordon started promoting Eastern Championship Wrestling and local bars and clubs and college gyms and that kind of stuff. A lot of people say that ECW was a reaction to the early 90s cartoony wrestling. I agree with that, but at first it was more of a love letter to the 1980s because a lot of the wrestlers they brought in were like Stan Hansen and Ivan Koloff and Jimmy Snuka, Tito Santana, the British Bulldog, Road Warrior Hawk, and so on and so forth. And then it was sprinkled in with local talent like a DC Drake, a JT Smith, the Sandman, and so on and so forth. So you had like these unknown guys and these, big name stars, especially for the early 90s. Getting Stan Hansen must have been phenomenal. Abdullah the Butcher, that's awesome. Eddie Gilbert coming right off his time in Memphis and in Continental, so real sweet. And then they got Paulie Dangerously, which is fantastic. Paul Heyman took over the book and it kind of changed the tone of the wrestling promotion. At that point, they went away from using the stars of yesteryear. I mean, obviously they were bringing like a Terry Funk and a Mick Foley as like the cornerstones, but he started really focusing on some guys that we'd never seen before, bringing some talent throughout the United States and from all over the world. So at that point, we got to see your Two Cold Scorpios and Ron Simmons and Shane Douglas and those guys. And I think at that point is where the Extreme kind of started. They didn't change the name until 1994. When Shane Douglas had won the NWA World Heavyweight Championship in the tournament, defeating Two Cold Scorpio, and he threw the belt down and proclaimed Extreme Championship Wrestling, ECW, as a world championship, and they were off and running. Throughout the 90s, they were very innovative, and they definitely set their mark in terms of the world of professional wrestling, both negatively and positively. We'll go into that in more detail. Up until its demise in 2001, and don't forget that they had their syndicated TV show, which was ECW Hardcore TV, and they actually had a national show on ECW on TNN, if you had the TNN channel, which turned into Spike. They finally folded in 2001. They went out of business, and then all of a sudden Paul Heyman showed up on Raw as the color commentator after they fired Jerry the King Lawler. When that fired, he quit. So Matt, what was your first interaction with ECW?
I think it was word of mouth from one of the guys at the school, and they were like, hey, check us out. And it was on late at night. I remember that. I remember the production values weren't crazy, but it's funny, like, as simple as it was, just, one camera shot pretty much. But I remember, of course, the staticky commercials and the music playing in the background. Like, I want to say it was Night Shot Man by Filter. And it'd be like, ECW is coming to, and it'd be like all these different places. I think I told you before that the whole thing where they'd work all of the cheesy like pay-per-view headlines or event headlines into like the promos. We'll make sure this is a November to remember.
Yeah. It's like
Ah,
they're going to be living dangerously.
right. Yeah.
Now, I started watching ECW in 1995, and the first thing that I saw was a promo by the Steiner brothers where Scott Steiner called Shawn Michaels and John B. Bad homosexuals. And I'm like, Shawn Michaels and John B. Bad is on this show? And they
Right.
weren't. I think after that, they had a six-man tag with, it was the Steiner brothers, and I think Eddie Guerrero versus Two Cold Scorpio and somebody else. And I thought, like, this is way different. Like the ECW arena was fantastic. Their crowd reactions were awesome. They used real music, and it felt very modern at the time because it was
Yep.
really in the times. So again, it's a microcosm, a time capsule, so to speak, of the '90s. When you go back and watch those today, they seem very dated, but that's because how entrenched they were at the times. So we're gonna go over the roster and then we'll give our thoughts on some of the guys that came through ECW. So Matt, I think we're gonna start off with the Sandman.
Oh, my mechanic decided to wrestle wrestler.
Now, in Sandman's defense, he does look like the guy at the end of the bar that you get in a bar fight with.
Yes.
And it's funny. I think the most interesting thing about the Sandman is his character evolution, where he started out as a surfer, known as the Sandman, with his wetsuit and his surfboard and his sunglasses, and evolved from there. And then he was sort of a pimp. So Sandman was a pimp that used to pimp out his wife and beat her, and then eventually she divorced him, and then he evolved into the modern Sandman that we all know and love. I think the biggest thing about Sandman was his entrance, coming in as Enter the Sandman with the beer and the kendo stick, and that really made him. Although by the time he got into the ring, probably not the best, matches bell to bell. Although he did have some really good hardcore brawls. Some of the angles that I really enjoyed with the Sandman was, I guess, the first big one was with Tommy Dreamer, where Tommy had blinded him and he couldn't see. And then the Sandman came out to retire, and he's like, "Oh, I'm blind." And then the woman came out and started yelling at him and shit. And then Tommy got a woman's face, and the Sandman revealed that he wasn't blind, and he beat up Tommy Dreamer. Then you had the stuff with Mikey, Mikey the underdog, finally getting the world championship by defeating the Sandman, which is fun. When Mikey's the underdog, the reluctant wrestler, kind of going through the process there. So. I thought that was fantastic, and I do enjoy his stuff, and when he went over to WCW, when he started taking steroids and got all jacked, I thought some of that stuff they did over there was fun. And then interesting to note that he was signed with the WWE in 2006, like 6 years after ECW went down, and he had actually a pretty decent run in the WWE. He's not someone that would make world champion of WWE, but I thought he was pretty good in the card, and he got a really good, positive crowd reaction. So next up is the franchise, Shane Douglas. What are your thoughts on Shane?
I like his evolution, and I think ECW as a whole did this very well, where they helped characters evolve from one particular non-appealing, if you want to call it that, kind of boring, static, to really more dynamic. And he's one of the guys that kind of did that, really took his character and expanded it. Francine, his approach, how he cut his promos. I think it really helped establish ECW.
Yeah, I mean, I know Shane gets a lot of shit for cutting these promos that are full of swearing and and making fun of Ric Flair and really getting after Vince McMahon, and he kind of made his bones doing that. But take out what he said, and I think the passion in his voice and the real anger. He was really pissed at these guys. He was really pissed at the Clique for supposedly holding him down. He was really upset by that. He was able to communicate that via promo, which is fantastic. And I'll say it today. This is real. If you look at 2001 Triple H, that's the franchise.
Hot take.
The game, the franchise. Look at their looks. Shane had the beard at one point. Triple H had the beard at one point. They had the Kango hats at one point. You put them side by side in a picture during those time frames. Like, okay, Triple H stole from the franchise, and no one really talks about that. Not even Shane himself brings that up, but it's legitimate. I mean, the game, the franchise, really, really. Come on, Triple H was he stole from Shane Douglas. Gimmick infringement. So up next is Raven. What are your thoughts on Raven?
Oh, I liked Raven a lot. He was one of my faves. I enjoyed his transformation from the laughable Scotty Polo, Johnny Flamingo, whatever it was. That
You have him
mixed.
reversed, but it's okay.
All right, Johnny Polo, Scotty Flamingo. All right, just to become more of a serious threat, diabolical in the way they played him up, and he was a great stable leader.
You gotta remember that prior to Scott Levy's evolution to Raven, he was on like All American with like Gorilla Monsoon, like going bowling and shit. You know what I mean? He was the manager of the Quebecers, and in WCW he was Scotty Flamingo, and he's having boxing matches with Johnny B. Bad. And so, although his stuff in Portland was really good, I do enjoy him in Portland. But at that point, if it wasn't for ECW, he would have probably faded into obscurity at that point. And the Raven character is, very similar to a Kevin Sullivan or a Jake Roberts to the point where even Raven started using the DDT, and he had Beulah, which is like his version of the Fallen Angel,
Hmm.
and I think his Raven's Nest, which was called in ECW, Raven's Flock in WCW. I think Raven, as a top guy, did a great job carrying that company, and it was really fantastic. His promos were amazing. Like, it was just next level stuff. We've never seen anyone cut, interviews like that before, and super innovative, and he went from being a comedy character to a super serious guy, and just a kick-ass badass. So, good for you. Next up is Tommy Dreamer. What are your thoughts on Tommy?
I was always, again, I was a Raven fan, so Tommy Dreamer, I was always like, whatever. But I think what got to me about him was that feud with Raven really helped sell him as a character to me,
Yeah.
and I think that really, for me as a fan, just was so much more of a well played out angle,
Yeah,
and
because
that
they're two sides of a different coin. It's like Superman Bizarro. They use the same finishers, they have the same taunt. They're just mirror image in the whole summer camp angle.
Oh,
Um,
I think that was a really good way to sell it too. The whole childhood friends thing
yeah,
really made it like that's freaking crazy.
they always said that Tommy was a good looking young babyface, and I'm like, when was the fuck this guy was good looking?
Yeah.
Jesus Christ! But he really got over with the Philadelphia crowd to the point
Well,
where,
in Philadelphia, he's good looking.
okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, let's be fair.
I think people forget that Philadelphia was a battleground city for the NWA and WWF for the longest time. I mean, they would run shows on the same night opposite each other. Philadelphia crowds were, they love their NWA and they love their WWF, and like
Yeah.
some people, it gets kind of muddled there a little bit. But how smart and vocal they are, it's pretty amazing to see. And in terms of Tommy, his legacy is more than anyone else is probably tied to ECW. I mean, he
Yeah.
had some runs in WWF. Worked a lot. Like, he was part of talent relations, and he worked in the office at WWF for quite a while. Now he's running his own promotion, House of Hardcore, which is actually, you see a lot of these ECW kind of reboot things, kind of one show and they're done, or a couple shows and they're done, and he's still running them. So he must be making money
Yeah.
on those. So good for you. Then he's hilarious. Next up is your favorite wrestler, Mikey Whip.
I enjoyed the presentation. I think one of the things they do well, or they did well, was they made the wrestler you think had no shot be more believable.
Yeah, big time.
Whereas I think you have to think there's some sort of viable. The idea was he was this hapless face, it's this poor wimpy kid.
And he was like legitimately wimpy. Like, he won the ECW television championship and tried to give it back because he was afraid his mom would find out and he would get in trouble. You know what I mean? And they've done underdogs in the past where they're brave and their size is not going to stop them. And he was just a face that was a coward.
Yeah.
He had like tag team matches where like Cactus Jack is like dragging him out to the ring with him. And I think they did Mikey really well. And I like his evolution as a character. So he went from this underdog guy to like this kind of pseudo Satanist punk rock guy towards the end. But he was really having good matches towards the end of ECW, with him and Tajiri as a tag team. So good stuff there. And then he ended up being a trainer, and he trained like Zack Ryders and Kurt Hawkins and Mikey from the Spirit Squad. So that stuff is all like fantastic. And he's from Long Island, so he gets points with me.
Oh, I don't know. My connection with Long Island is very different.
Oh boy.
No, off air.
Jesus. So next up is the human suplex machine, Taz. What are your thoughts on
He's
Taz?
a bum. He's a Boom. No, I will say this: he was a better wrestler than commentator
He got better towards the end.
towards the end, but for a while he was so painful on
He
commentary.
said he tried to get over the term rocket buster, like slobber knocker.
There, there's this movie Jaws 3, okay, and in it Dennis Quaid gives one of his most. He showed up to like get a paycheck performances,
Hmm.
and there's a scene towards the end where they come out of the water and the shark's been killed, and there were dolphins trying to help them, and one of the dolphins is missing. And Dennis Quaid's like, and she's like, "Oh, Charlie, like Charlie the dolphin, come out, Charlie." She's splashing the water, and he's like, "Yeah, I don't think she made it. Yeah." It's like so tone deaf. His commentary always struck me like that.
Mm.
But as a performer, I didn't like him because he did dangerous spots that you never saw him take in return.
He liked to
And
drop dudes on their heads.
yeah, he was reckless. And I know both people have to make the spot happen, but like, when you're in charge, you can do what you want if you get the right position on. And he was strong enough that he could pull it
Oh,
off.
he was jacked. I mean, small guy in terms of height, but jacked as all hell. And it's funny when we talk about evolution. His start as the Tasmaniac, which is an awful gimmick. He was a Tasmanian devil, like a
Yeah.
savage, and then he breaks his neck and comes back. Well, I think he was already turning into like regular Taz before he broke his neck, but he comes back as the suplex machine, and he's the guy who brought tap outs to professional wrestling. And great promo, just super intense. Like he's just a scary dude. And he was the first guy to flip off the crowd. So Steve Austin stole that from him. He probably not the first person of all time to do it, but I guess he's the first person to do it during that time frame. But as the ECW champion and as the fuck the world champion, and his matches with Sabu were awesome and a big part of what ECW was all about.
Yeah.
Speaking of Sabu, what are your thoughts on Sabu?
I enjoyed Sabu a lot as a performer. He gave the best promos.
The fact that he didn't talk.
Well, yeah, yeah, but no, he was a scary looking dude. Like I said, wrestlers should look like they could either beat the hell out of you or kill you, like you're scared of him.
Yeah,
He's those guys. He was not a big dude at all,
yeah.
but he was scary looking. Like you're, oh shit, and rightfully so.
I mean, the stuff that he was doing was completely innovative, stuff that we've never seen before. Triple jump moonsault, fantastic. Those spots through the tables. He's probably just now getting the credit for kind of innovating, wrestling. Maybe not for the best, but innovated the table. I mean, that's a big thing now. You see guys do every pay per view, someone goes through a table at this point. So and that's all thanks to Sabu. Obviously he is the nephew of the Sheik, so there's definitely a history there. He was a good little, like he can throw some amateur moves every once in a while. Tend to be a little sloppy in the ring, but again, that's because he's doing stuff that's never been tried before.
Right.
So he gets a pass on some of those. But I think overall fantastic. His package, when he first came to ECW with Paulie Dangerously and 911, he's coming out in the gurney. I mean, that stuff was fantastic and completely insane. And he got his big time exposure in ECW. Prior to that, he was working on North Indies, and he was in Japan and that kind of stuff. But he eventually got signed to WCW in 1985 and wrestled Alex Wright and Mr. JL. Although I was banking on the Sabu versus Hulk Hogan match that was never going to happen.
Yeah.
Like, oh, they're gonna put Sabu in the Dungeon of Doom, which would have been fantastic. That would have saved the Dungeon of Doom, I think.
Well, you are a huge Dungeon of Doom fan.
I am, and I get shit for it all the time. I think Dungeon of Doom is fantastic. So, fuck off, everybody.
Oh yeah.
I'm gonna do a whole show on the Dungeon of Doom. That's going to happen. No one's gonna listen to it.
You know who? Kevin Sullivan will listen to it.
Sullivan, my son. They had monster trucks. They had a monster truck. I'm not even gonna justify it. I don't even feel like I have to. They had monster trucks. That's it. Oh, what are your thoughts on Chris Jericho?
Chris Jericho in ECW?
Yeah, he was only there for like I think a couple months.
I was gonna say he wasn't there that long, but I enjoyed Jericho. I think he's one of those guys. I still think his WWF debut is one of the best ever.
I agree.
That was just so well done, and not enough guys do. Like, if you're not gonna do vignettes to establish the characters when they walk in the ring, we have a reason to give a shit who they are. You expect us to be like, oh, and here we have new wrestler. Here he comes now. Who the hell is this guy? I don't care if you're at WWF, TNA, Ring of Honor, New Japan, or an independent show. If you walk out and you have no interaction with the fans at first or any kind of setup, it's a hard sell.
Agreed.
And that's why I feel like, the more you do pre-show, whether that's tables of people talking to the wrestlers, a heel comes out, causes a scene, comes out first and sets the stage up, right? Or even like a handout, like who your roster is. We will know. It's a way to help sell the character. And I feel like a lot of the times in wrestling, they don't do enough of that. So when you watch TV, you're like, oh, who's this guy? I think that's the problem with the 205 show, actually, but that's another story.
They didn't do more in-depth stuff on the guys in 205, but that's
Right.
a whole other
It's
show.
it's just one of those things like, look how great they are. Well, yeah, but why do I care? Anyways, so Jericho to me, to bring it back to the high flying stuff, was really great that way because back when he was doing a lot of really crisp, crazy stuff, but not as good as your other favorite Canadian.
Speaking of the greatest Canadian wrestler to ever come out of ECW, Lance Storm. What are your thoughts on Lance Storm?
It's stiff. I think he was like Jericho. He was excellent, fun to watch. I think the spoof they did on him of being so serious was great. It was a great addition. And I think he made the most of it when a lot of guys could have just avoided that.
Yeah. And I'm saying this right now. Bell to bell. Lance Storm's a better wrestler than Chris Jericho.
Oh my God! Hot take number 2. Hot takes.
Chris Jericho is a better professional wrestler overall. I mean, because he's the character, he's better promo. But if you look at their ring work, Jericho is sloppy. Less now. He's not as sloppy as he used to be. Like, watch some WCW stuff, watch some ECW stuff, early WWF stuff. He misses moves all the time.
Really?
That's just the fact of the matter is. And Lance Storm is so smooth in the ring, super athletic, good-looking dude. They probably should have done more with him in ECW, but they didn't. They did at first. They did a lot with him in WCW. Like they put the Cruiserweight Championship on him. They put TV belt, the US belt, all at the same time. Like he won them all. And then he went for the world title, and he got squashed by Kevin Nash. And I was like, oh, they should have had him win it. Because at that point, who cares about the WCW world title? You know what I mean? Like, if you have a guy making history who went through, from cruiserweight to world title, that's a hell of a story. And Lance Storm, for the last year of WCW, was a bright spot, definitely. And he's a hell of a trainer, and he's hilarious. You gotta watch Lance Storm interviews, like when he does like podcasts and stuff, because he's funny as shit.
Really?
Yeah, he's awesome.
I will say, I think one question to think about is Jericho sloppier now because of age or because he's part-time or what?
No, he's actually less sloppy now.
Okay.
That's probably because he's toned down his style quite a bit. But yeah, he just he's just you can, if you really wanted to, you could do a whole episode of Botchamania on Chris Jericho. Like, I'm serious. But what are you gonna do? Speaking of guys who had innovative offensive, Rob Van Dam. What are your thoughts on Rob?
Oh, I enjoyed Rob Van Dam a lot. I liked his style. His personality was so different from guys who are always like screaming at the mic.
Yeah.
He's just like, yeah, man, I'm gonna kick your ass or whatever. I like the teaming him and Sabu because it was so random.
But it made sense because they trained together. You know what I mean? So
right.
Even though it was a ridiculous pairing,
yeah,
they were trained by the Sheik together. So it made a lot of sense. And I think Rob overall, his style fit really well with ECW. He had good promos back then. They didn't give him a microphone in WWF at all. But even like the Mr. Monday Night stuff and the stuff he did with Jerry Lawler and all that stuff on ECW television was fantastic. And it's a shame that he broke his leg because I would probably give him the world belt. He probably should have beat Mike Awesome for the belt.
Yeah.
He probably should have been the guy.
But I always say my fondest memory of Rob Van Dam is that when he broke his leg, I had written a script for a wrestling movie. And I sent him a letter and said, hey, well, first the email, I said, hey, would you be interested in reading this script for me? And he was like, sure, man. So I sent him the script and two CDs with music on them because it's part of the way the script was played out. And not only did he read the script, but he sent it back with notes. And I was like, that was pretty damn cool,
He's a sweetheart.
Yeah, he's a cool dude.
Yeah, he's awesome. And the probably the final big feud, like the next logical feud for him would have been a Rhino if they didn't go out of business over the world title. Unfortunately, they never made it that far. But it would have been sweet to see that that Rhino versus RVD matchup for the world title. So that's a shame. And he ended up winning the WWF World Title eventually. He did it at the One Night Stand pay-per-view with the famous "If Cena wins, we riot," which probably was the start, at least on a bigger scale, of the fans, the smart fans turning on John Cena. Yeah. I don't think I would have put him in that spot personally, but I guess it's worked for them. It hasn't worked for Roman Reigns, I'll tell you that much.
Yeah, Roman Reigns.
Yeah.
Ugh.
Ugh. It's not his fault. I'll keep on saying that.
I know, I know. It just it's one of those things that really it's not gonna happen. It reminds me of like
Luger?
no. I was gonna go like pop culture, like those movies where the nerdy guys, swooning over the hot girl.
Like Lucas?
Yeah.
Lucas is a good flick.
Nah, Lucas is shit. Hot takes.
Fuck off.
No, just those movies where like the creepy guys like you like Biff Tannen. Biff Tannen wants to get with Marty's mom.
Yeah.
Well, Biff Tannen is Roman Reigns. They want him to be the most popular guy. They think, well, I'm popular. I've got the look. I've got the moves. I've got my little grab my wrist and load my fist up for the Superman punch. And people hate you. People hate you because I'm telling you, if they want to make him like a super like mega heel, have him cost someone like Sami Zayn or I'm trying to think some lovable babyface. Like you'd want to see win the world title.
Yeah.
Have him cost them that title, and then you're gonna like turn heel. And I think they're afraid of doing it. They're afraid like, well, then we're submitting to your thing. But like, it's just that makes good writing.
They've done it
Like,
before. They've done it
yeah,
before. Like the fans turned Scott Hall. Like Razor Ramon was a heel. The fans turned him babyface. Same thing
right.
with Jake Roberts. He did a feud with Hulk Hogan. He's about to feud with Hulk Hogan. He ran in on Hulk Hogan, gave him a DDT, and the crowd cheered. So it's like, fuck, we gotta turn him babyface. Fuck that feud with Hulk Hogan.
Right.
You know what I mean? So it's that's a whole other thing. Fuck those guys.
This should have been the Fuck Those Guys podcast.
So next up is the Dudley Boys. What are your thoughts on the Dudley Boys?
Uh, Back in the day, I thought they were a step above like the Rottens, who I wasn't a fan of.
Mm.
And I thought the Rottens were better than the Nasty Boys, who I always hated.
I love the Nasty Boys should have been in ECW. Shit.
Exactly. That's the thing. I was always like, what? But the Dudleys, and like with Spike Dudley and Big Dick Dudley.
The concept is hilarious.
Yeah.
Yeah, the traveling salesman who went around and impregnated all these women's and the sons all become professional wrestlers.
But it's just, I thought they did a good job with it, and the gag glasses, whatever, and that they were so hardcore on the tables and everything else. But they were a perfect example of like making the most out of their ECW gimmick
Bubba Ray Dudley once spit on my best friend in a parking lot at an ECW show
for $5.
for no reason.
I love it. Oh, you asked him to. Oh, sick bastard.
He was like, "What a dick!" But at that point, you're cutting promos. They cause them riots, and it's like Billy's will come out riot, 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 and they'll work out a lot better probably once they hit the WWF. I mean, those matches with the Hardy Boys and Edge and Christian are fantastic. And, in ECW, they're having matches with, like, the Gangsters, who are not the greatest workers in the world. I think they had some matches with, like, one match with Public Enemy, a couple matches with the Eliminators.
Oh man, the gang was that JTG?
No, that's Crime Time.
Who are the gangsters?
That's New Jack and Mustafa. Racist.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I'm thinking.
What are you trying to say? They all look alike?
No, I thought you mentioned WWF, and I was like, oh, I was thinking Dudley's. But yeah, the gangsters. They should have had a better name than gangsters.
It's Gangstas, by the way, not
I'm sorry,
Gangsters.
stars.
Yeah, there you go. So speaking of the Gangsters, what are your thoughts on New Jack?
Scary as fuck.
Yeah, for real.
He's what I think Abdul the Butcher was to like people in the
I
80s.
agree. I absolutely agree.
He was the guy who was like, oh shit. Like if someone said, oh my god, who's the champion gonna face tonight? Oh my god, that's New Jack! He's gonna kill him!
Yeah,
that's a
New Jack,
bounty wrestler type thing.
New Jack is a modern day Abdul the Butcher, and I heard rumors. They were doing this angle where John Cena got stabbed in the club. This is when he's like full on rapper gimmick before he won the world title.
Yeah.
And the rumors was going to be that it was New Jack who did it, and they're going to bring New Jack in to fight John Cena.
Oh my god.
And that never went anywhere, but probably because New Jack's not allowed in like 30 states.
Really?
Yeah, he can only travel to certain states because he has so many outstanding warrants and arrests, and and shit like that, where he's not allowed certain places. So, but yeah, he is a modern day Abdul the Butcher, for sure. And some of those spots of him jumping off the fucking balconies through the tables and that stuff is all amazing. Do you want to talk about the mass transit incident because that was in your neck of the woods?
Yeah, a friend of mine went to that, and what it was essentially a kid lied about his age and experience, and he dressed like an MBTA, which, if you're not from this area, Boston area, is Mass Busing Transit Authority. It's like MBTA. So we up here we say in the subway we say you take the T. So that's like a subway trains. It's a T. Take a bus. It's a T. So he was supposed to be like in this tag match, and he bladed him hard, like forehead.
Yeah,
And the
he
kid
hit
bled.
his actor knife and fucking zipped him coast to coast.
Yeah, bled him like crazy. And I just that was horrifying. But a friend of mine was there, and as their EMTs are working on the kid, New Jack was walking by him and his friend, and he turned and was like, "He's gonna die! He's gonna motherfucking die, and I don't care!" And like, that's New Jack. Like he's a scary fucker. And he even said like right then he was like, "Holy shit!" And he said that was probably the best like wrestling experience he's ever had.
Yeah.
A live show because it was just so like the fans were insane, and it was an atmosphere of just super intense. It's like when they have wrestling shows, and the night after a pay-per-view they have it like in like New York or Philadelphia. It's always a really hype audience, you
Yeah.
know. And there's some show coming up. I think next year's Rumble is in Philadelphia.
Oh my God.
I want to say it's like Philadelphia, and I was like, are you fucking kidding me?
That's
Because
that's them being tone deaf.
yeah, because if they have Roman Reigns with a belt and he's not a heel, because again, Roman Reigns could be an ultimate huge heel if he wanted to.
Right.
Like, I think back to like when Hogan turned heel, it was like holy fuck,
Yeah.
you know, like you didn't see it coming, and then he sold it perfectly. He worked it so well. So I just would not want to see Reigns pull this like and
Well,
then just not go anywhere with
let
it.
me ask you a question. Since the Rumble's in Philly, would you bring in like they always do their surprises for the Royal Rumble. They didn't do a whole lot this year, but would you bring in like a Sandman or a Tommy Dreamer to the Rumble because it is Philadelphia?
Yeah, I can see that. I think if they wanted to have an awesome reaction, like the fans are going to talk about, the number 5 entrant, bump, 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 like the Sandman just starts playing, he
Yeah.
comes out of the audience. Oh, granted, he's still able to wrestle or not, but
He can still go.
yeah, I mean, like, and really, if you have to take 1 or 2 bumps, whatever, but he could, like, reverse as a Rob Van Dam or someone like that, Tommy Dreamer.
Because at the end of the day, we forget, and I think sometimes the WWE forgets that wrestling is about moments.
Right, and I think that's what ECW did very well.
Yeah.
ECW built up to moments because they had good storylines. They had wrestlers who sold their parts very well, from Mikey Whipwreck to Sabu to Raven, across the board. They really worked hard at that. You can see Paul Heyman's fingerprints,
Yeah.
And I think it's why a lot of times we have trouble with wrestling nowadays is they expect us to react to moments, and again, there's no intro.
Yeah.
Like, I write scripts and stuff, and I have certain scenes that if you just saw that scene alone, stand alone, you'd be like, oh, it was good. But if you read the script and knew the story or watched the movie of it, you'd be like, oh, that scene was awesome, And that's because you build it up to it.
I think one of the things that ECW did extremely well that the WWE did well for a while, but then stopped doing was the music video package.
Yeah,
So
that was always good.
so ECW would have like November Rain, or they would have a Nirvana one. With, they recap the feud with Tommy Dreamer and Raven, and those were fantastic. And WWE did it for a while in the early 2000s, but they went away from that. I think if they went back and did that again today, I think that would work. Using modern music or cool stuff, or even some throwback music. Fuck it. Good music is good music no matter when it came out at this point.
Right.
To really get over some of these angles, especially when you're running 2 pay-per-views a month like they're doing right now. So that's pretty insane. But next up is your boy, Perry Saturn.
Yep. One guy's that trained me.
Yeah.
I think he's another guy who made the most of his skills. I love the Eliminators. I love the Total Elimination finisher. I think it was really, a good showcase for him.
He did an elbow drop off a fucking scaffold onto like Dr. Death.
I remember that, really.
Yeah, it's insane. It's one of the most insane spots you ever see in your entire life. Perry was awesome. He was one of the original trainers for ECW. innovative in terms of moves in the ring. Had a good character. He was misused slightly in WCW, but he was used better in WCW than he was in WWF. They gave him a
Right.
fucking mop and have him come out with a dress, and it's ridiculous. But like a lot of these wrestlers, his demons kind of got the best of him, and I know he's in a bad state right now, and I think our prayers are out to him at this point to
Right.
hope he comes out of it because he's a fun. I saw an interview with him on highspots.com, one their ECW show, and he is funny as all hell. He is hilarious. So I like Perry Saturn. I don't understand why he has a tattoo on his face, but what are you gonna do?
Well, I think a lot of guys have that happen to them. It's
Well,
like,
is that you go crazy at some point? Like you go nuts and you just put tattoo on your face?
I think so. It's like a lot of people get too many tattoos, and it's like, they don't come off that easy.
No, not at all. So next up is Al Snow. What are your thoughts on Al Snow?
Uh, I wasn't a huge. I mean, I liked him, but I wasn't like a huge, huge fan. But again, I think it goes to the fact that you can mention a lot of these names, and they all have some bright spots.
Yeah.
Where they're serious feuds. I mean, I think of his WWE experience and the whole head thing, and then his dog getting eaten.
I liked him as Leaf Cassidy in the WWF. As part of,
Oh, right.
as part of the New Rockers. But Al Snow, I thought his stuff in ECW was great in terms of like the head gimmick and he's crazy and they had that fantastic match with Shane Douglas and I think overall his performance there was fantastic and it led him to come back to WWF and be a solid hand for them. The one thing I don't like about Al Snow, if you listen to any of his interviews, he makes people feel bad for liking wrestling. And this is the tone I get from when he does these interviews.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, you like wrestling? You're an idiot. Now, he doesn't come out and say that, but he makes me feel that way. And I'm like, so I don't really like listen to anything he has to say because why want to listen to something that's going to make me feel stupid for liking something, so it's ridiculous. So, but he works with TNA. He's been a trainer. He does stuff backstage. I think overall, I like his work. I think he's fantastic. So, and then one of the guys that are completely underrated and no one talks about is Tuco Scorpio. So, what are your thoughts on Tuco?
Uh, I, I like this stuff ECW way more than anywhere else I saw him.
Agreed.
Mostly because I saw him in a match against Bobby Eaton once. I don't know if it was the TV title or what it was for, but he went for like a flip off the top rope and basically just ass smashed Bobby in the head.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh my God, Bobby's dead. As someone who once had a large man land on his head with his ass and heard something crack, and to this day, I don't know what happened, but I repeat myself sometimes. No, it's like, oh my God, Bob Eaton's dead. I think Too Cold Scorpio did a really good job with again the character, and I think it's because the fans bought in as well, and that's the thing I think when we talk about like Roman Reigns struggles or the struggles of like Dean Ambrose, whose character to me, Dean Ambrose is every backyard wrestler who makes it and just doesn't elevate his game. Like he's just lazy, oh yeah, I'm here, whatever, I'm having a big gulp. Like these guys all committed. Like Too Cold Scorpio, you knew who he was.
Like Too Cold, legit tough guy that can do flips. He was doing moonsaults and 450s and moonsault leg drops and all kinds of crazy fucking shit. But he was a good, bell to bell worker too. Good promo. Never got used well anywhere else. Like when he was Flash Funk or, even in.
Oh my God, Flash Funk.
It was like,
man,
what are you doing? He's Too Cold Scorpio. Why can't he just be Too Cold Scorpio? Which happened to a lot of guys, Mick Foley, in WWF. And I was wondering, I was like, he's awesome. Why is he not in matches with Shawn Michaels? I don't understand.
Yeah.
So it's ridiculous. Next up, we have Mick Foley. What are your thoughts on Cactus Jack?
I still think one of my favorite promos ever from ECW was Mick Foley's anti-hardcore. That was just, it was so great because it was just such a twist.
Yeah.
Like
that's not the that's probably the first time Mick Foley has turned on the fans like that. And
right.
he was legitimately upset that he would put his body in the line and the fans would sometimes shit on him and stuff like that and he didn't understand why but I think some of the vignettes he had like with him at the amusement park and him trying to put the pencil behind his ear and it falls off because he doesn't have an ear anymore. Him doing stuff like he was do the takedown, the headlock takeover on the floor, and he's like hardcore. He's hardcore, and he's trying to be a legitimate wrestler. But yeah, I think we've seen good promos from Mick Foley before in WCW, but he definitely elevated while he was there in ECW. You can say that for a lot of guys, and his stuff there was awesome. And I think his stuff with him and Raven and Tommy and him he's trying to get Tommy a contract with WCW. He's
Really?
like, well, in the storyline, he's
Yeah.
like, Tommy, you're a good wrestler, you're good looking. You don't need to be in ECW. Don't go through tables. Don't get bloody. Go to WCW. It's a wonderland. So
Oh.
Mick Foley had this shirt, and he had two shirts. One of them, I wish he still had one of them. And he had a shirt with Eric Bischoff's face on it, and on the back of it says, "Forgive me, Uncle Eric," because he was like trying to get his job back.
Yeah.
And then in the match with Tommy Dreamer puts the shirt over his head, so it's like Bischoff's face is over Mick Foley's face, and he's punching him in the face. And then Mick Foley had a Dungeon of Doom T-shirt, and like it's like an airbrush one, like someone he made in a flea market somewhere. I was like, oh, that's so awesome.
Oh man.
And it's like little shit like that I think I love shit like that. It's awesome. I mean, we can talk about Steve Austin's kind of transformation from sending Steve Austin to Stone Cold and ECW, but he was only there for, I would say, about a month. You know, had two matches. He had a three-way dance with the Sandman, Mickey Whipwreck, and himself, and then he had a match with Mikey Whipwreck, which he lost. He lost both matches.
Oh wow.
Yeah, so Mikey Whipwreck retained the ECW World Title over Steve Austin. The rumor has it, at least according to Paul Heyman, that he wanted to put the belt on Austin, and it's like, nope, I'm putting this kid over.
Oh
So,
shit.
yeah. Good for you, Austin. Although he did steal Mikey's finisher, which was the whippersnapper, which is the stunner.
Yeah. He made a deal with him and said, "Hey, look, I'll put you over. I'm taking your finisher." Okay, Mr. Austin.
It's awesome. Those Austin promos. The Monday Night NyQuil, which is a great one. Steve Mania, where he's dressed up as Hulk Hogan. Again, it was very much like a Shane Douglas type promo. He's burying Dusty Rhodes, he's burying Ric Flair, he's burying Hulk Hogan, and that kind of stuff. But you know, you can see the passion behind it, and it was awesome. Welcome to Monday NyQuil. And he had bongo drums instead of Mongo, and he's wearing a fucking Bischoff wig, and it's ridiculous.
I think he's one of those guys. He was legit funny.
Oh, he's hilarious. I wish he was. You watch his podcast, and some of the times I like him less as time goes on.
Yeah.
As time passes, I like him less. I don't know why. Especially with some of his interactions with some of the younger guys on his podcast. It's just, and then the allegations, that he's a wife beater and such. I don't know how true that is or not. But yeah, I find myself liking him less. Rhino. What are your thoughts on Rhino?
Gore! Gore! Gore!
I'll tell you this right now. Rhino has a better spear than Goldberg, Roman Reigns, and Edge.
This takes too hot.
That's the truth. I mean, that's just a fact. Although he probably legitly fucking crushed people with that. He once did it to the Sandman's wife and then power drove her through a table.
Oh, I remember that. That was fantastic.
Yeah.
I mean, that was fantastic.
That was horrible. So, what are your thoughts overall on Rhino, the last ECW champion?
Oh, that's right. Yeah, I enjoyed him, and I think I don't want to say he didn't live up to potential. I think he did what he could do, but I always thought we're going to see more out of him. And maybe it just was the timing, But I enjoyed Rhino a lot.
Yeah, I thought he was fantastic. I think his package, and he started out with.
What about his package, you sicko?
It's not as big as you would think.
Oh.
But I thought, where he was with Carino and that kind of stuff, I thought was awesome. So
Yeah.
Overall, super cool stuff. What are your thoughts on Mike Awesome?
Didn't like him.
Is it because he dropped people on their heads?
Yeah, he goes to the Taz school of, I'm going to make this real easy for you.
It's funny because obviously he's mostly remembered for his series with Masato Tanaka, but you don't really hear about some of his other good matches because they didn't exist. Although he did have a good match with Spike Dudley, but I think it's more Spike Dudley than anything else. It's funny that Vince wasn't all over this guy because he looks like a Vince wet dream, supposedly. You know what I mean? They brought him in the WWF for like 3 seconds and then fired him. But, just looking at him, he's fucking like 6'6", fucking jacked to the gills, and is super athletic. I thought, Vince would be all over this guy, but that's not the case. Although they did kind of ruin him in WCW when he was that 70s guy and the fat chick Thriller, and he's fighting ICP on top of the Partridge Family bus, which is ridiculous.
Yeah, that was unfortunate.
Yeah. But even the stuff in like FMW, like he could match with Hayabusa too. So can you imagine like Bret Hart wrestling Mike Awesome and fucking dropped on his head or fucking powerbomb from the ring to the floor and shit? Like that wasn't gonna happen. And
Yeah.
he's related to Hulk Hogan too, sort of, kinda.
I always thought he looked like a super roided up Roddy Piper.
Yeah, I can see that.
Like if Roddy Piper was just like, give me more pills, coach.
That's sad what happened to Mike Awesome. So
What happened to him?
committed suicide.
Did he shoot himself?
Thought he hung himself.
Oh yeah, I was trying to remember what it was, and I couldn't remember the day.
Yeah, so he must have some emotional issues clearly that caused him to do that because I thought he was a fantastic, at least character. I thought he was at least interesting. What are your thoughts on Justin Incredible?
Oh, I think it's funny because what was his name? Pablo? No,
No,
shit. And
Aldo Montoya.
Aldo Montoya. I was trying to remember. And that was just a shitty thing with the whole Lawler stuff. I hated that. So to see him just incredible, like it was like that was all like again taking something shitty and growing out of it.
Yeah.
I think a lot of I was trying to tell the guys that night at school that when you're young, you think you're gonna be the next big star. Like you think every match is important, right? And I once declined a chance to go to the Boston Garden for like a TV taping to get destroyed by the Road Warriors, me and this other guy. So I was like no. And I think I was so afraid of like, well, what if someday I want to be a big star and they had this tape? Not thinking like, no, he's basically saying, here's an audition, go impress them.
Right.
Because at the time my mindset was wrong. So with Just Incredible, I look at that guy as a guy who took like this shitty, embarrassing humiliation and grew from it.
Yeah.
Whereas someone like Terry Taylor kind of derailed his career.
Yeah.
Like he was a guy who was like a next type Ric Flair, like had the looks, the moves, the personality, the promos, and then just went and became the Red Rooster.
Terry Taylor was overrated. Fuck that guy.
I thought he was good. Not like the best ever, but I thought he was good.
He had good matches with Ric Flair, but you can say that about 100 different guys.
Yes. Oh.
Douche.
You ever met him?
No, but he just comes off like he has a big ego, never accomplished anything. He's very, you hear him in interviews, he's condescending.
He battled Nikita Koloff in a TV title versus TV title series. I actually met him at one of those we used to have wrestlers come in and do training sessions.
Yeah.
So he came in and kind of talked about life on the road and blah blah. And one of the things he taught me to this day I still think about was whenever he took pictures of anybody, he leaned forward and kind of on the balls of his feet. And I said, what are you doing? He goes, no matter where you are, who it is, you're going to look a little bit taller if you do that. And he's right. He's right. So I was like, all right.
Yeah, the question I have, and the question I
Yeah.
want to ask him if I ever meet him, why was his knee pads on his shins?
He's stoned out of his mind, maybe? I don't know.
Fucking A. Fuck the Red Rooster. I did like him as Terrence Taylor in WCW, though. When he was part of the York Foundation. That was good. He had a good sequence of moves with. He made Luger look real good during Lethal Lottery.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, people love him, and I don't get it.
I liked him. I think my thing though was I was a bigger Chris Adams fan,
Okay.
and that feud to me was really well done. And I liked Eddie Gilbert. I know he was kind of a dick, but guilty.
I think Chris Adams has a better super kick than Shawn Michaels.
Oh my God, that's the hotter of hot takes. Boy, that's a hot take. I don't know what voice that was. But the point is that Terry Taylor is what I would consider if you were running a local let's say Florida, Georgia,
Yeah.
whatever. He's your regional champion.
He's your Brad Armstrong.
Yeah. Oh, well, come on. Brad Armstrong was awesome. I liked him a lot.
Yeah, I'm not dissing Brad Armstrong. I'm just saying.
Exactly. But the guy that's reliable, consistent, and could be great to have your up and coming guy feud with, and have be that constant persona, or to challenge him. There isn't enough of really. I think we talked about when you bring in somebody else for a show, how much money is it costing you, and what's the bang for your buck?
Right.
We were. I'll tell you later.
I liked Terry Taylor's matches with Jacques Rougeau in 1982 in Memphis. Those were pretty good. They were. Retro.
Remember that one match you had in '82 with Jacques Rougeau? Nah, man.
Over the I remember American Light Heavyweight Championship, whatever.
Oh, is it true that Terry Taylor actually lost that title to Alan Jackson, the light heavyweight NWA championship or junior heavyweight championship? Remember that?
I thought it was no, that's Mike Davis.
Mike, no, not Mike Davis. Mike Jackson, wasn't it?
Like Mike, like the Black Mike Jackson
No,
from.
no, the white guy.
Oh yeah, White Mike Jackson.
White. Oh, here he comes, good old white Mike Jackson.
I was thinking about Michael Saxon in WWF, the job that looked like Michael Jackson.
Oh God,
Yeah, he was awesome.
not Rocky King.
No, not Rocky King.
Remember Rocky King?
I remember Rocky King was in the Freebirds.
Yes.
What? He was their number one roadie.
Yep.
And our final name that we're going to talk about. What are your thoughts on Steve Corino?
Steve Corino. I liked his gimmick, the old school thing, and
Yeah.
I thought he was a fun heel. He was kind of one of those guys that I don't think I appreciated much at the time, but I look back now and appreciate more. Kind of like Stevie Richards.
I think you would say Stevie Ray from Harlem Heat.
Stevie Ray. Bum, 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 da, 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 da.
We'll talk about Stevie in a minute. Yeah, I think Carino made his career. I think Dusty Rhodes really put him over. Like he had bullet matches with Dusty Rhodes in ECW, and he was bleeding all over the place. And he probably was most helped elevated by ECW as ECW closed. And he was signed to WCW, but WWF didn't take his contract. So back to the Indies he went, and he ended up winning the NWA World Title and going over to Japan and having this, really nice indie career until, ended up in Ring of Honor for a while, and then now he's a commentator, and now he's going to WWE as a trainer. So,
yeah, again, I will say as a training front, I like that WWE is really bringing in different guys to train because when they first were doing that, training center,
you would only have Bill DeMott or Tom
Right.
Pritchard.
and you had two essentially styles. Were creating these, similar guys. And,
Cookie cutter.
yeah, and one of them telling the guys like, we do all the same moves in practice, but you've got to start putting your own spin on it. It's important to do that. Let your character breathe through everything. And I keep telling them all the time, like, if I tell you your promo is at the Dunkin' Donuts and they screwed up your order, or if I tell you you're going for a title shot tomorrow, give me a promo on each. In character. It shouldn't matter. Your character's going to respond. Like it's in real life, You're going to respond that way.
Yeah, definitely agree. So next up we have Dancing, Stevie Richards. What are your thoughts on Stevie?
I was a fan of his. I think if he hadn't gotten hurt, his career would have gone a lot deeper. I did chuckle because I did the Diamond Dallas Page yoga, and he was one of his, crew helping him do the exercise. I'm like, yeah, Stevie Richards. He didn't super kick any of the women on the show either. I was waiting for him to turn around and be like, oh, super kick, and then Diamond Dallas Page turns and gives you a little of the diamond cutter, but that didn't happen.
Stevie could have been the next Shawn Michaels. He was that good in the ring.
Holy hot take, fans!
He's super fucking underrated, like ridiculously underrated. And like he said, if he didn't get hurt, he would have probably been. He could have been Intercontinental Champion. He could have been WWE Champion, in my opinion. Good promo. You even see his Right to Censor stuff when he was Steven Richards and Right to Censor and all that shit. That stuff is awesome. He did such a great job with that, and he's someone that deserved the push. He did end up getting a little bigger. He was a little skinny at first, but he did end up getting a little bigger. And I love Stevie Richards. I think he's fantastic, hilarious guy. The Blue World Order, which was awesome. He's big Stevie, cool, and that shit. I thought that stuff was all awesome. And unfortunately, his career got derailed. From what I understand, he's in a good place right now. He's hanging out with DDP doing yoga, so staying in shape. So he probably has another run left in him.
You never know.
So Matt, what do you think the overall legacy of ECW is?
I think the overall legacy is taking something that could have been just a blood-soaked shithole like Caribbean and making it very positive in a sense of all the creative energy that came out of that.
I think the biggest thing about that show, about that promotion, was their TV show. If you go back and watch Hardcore TV, it's probably the best edited wrestling program of all time. And I'm surprised that indies or shows that have television or even pay-per-views, they don't edit it that way. It's so frenetic, it's so fast-paced, it's quick cuts, it's the way they insert promos, the big promo package at the end that has the Pulp Fiction music. The show is very frenetic. It's the fastest 60 minutes of television you'll ever see.
Yeah.
And you're almost jonesing for the next episode. It's like you can sit there and binge watch 30 episodes of ECW Hardcore TV in a row. Because they had 3 weeks to cut it. Because they had to show every 3 weeks. So 3 weeks worth of TV in one show, like everyone else did TV tapings back in the day. But the show was so fanatic. It was like, and you're watching it, and the attention to detail, they didn't really drop anything until much later. That's when they started dropping angles. But it's talking like 94, 95, 96, 97. Like they were super on point. So I wish that more independence, even if Ring of Honor cut that show that way, because Ring of Honor's TV show is boring as shit.
Yeah.
It's just that's boring. Like, it's great wrestling, but the show is fucking boring as hell. It's like watching fucking AWA.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? If they cut it like that, they just cut it up fast, and they chopped up their matches because those guys, Hack Myers and fucking JT Smith, are not having good matches, but they cut it up enough to make it look halfway decent. So,
Yeah.
I think the editing is fantastic in terms of overall impact on the wrestling business. Now, a lot of people said that ECW invented the Attitude Era. I think the Attitude Era was coming anyway. There was a lot of guys on the creative team, Jim Cornette, Russo, Bruce Pritchard, that was trying to get Vince away from, your dentist and your goons and those types of characters into more modern, believable, wrestlers. They wanted, believability. They wanted wrestlers on their show. I think Attitude would have came from that eventually, maybe not as fast. Although there was a lot of guys in WWE that were watching, especially like Shane McMahon was a big fan. Vince Russo was a big fan. Bruce Pritchard watched all the time. They were fans of ECW. And so I think that would have came eventually. I mean, there are some negative aspects. Those unprotected chair shots, if you watch some of those, like, oh my God, they made you want to throw up. I think, their lasting legacy is something that started from literally nothing and became at least a national phenomenon. At this point, is a global phenomenon. Although I don't remember any of you motherfuckers who were fans of ECW back there at the shows because they probably would have stayed in business. They're probably more popular now than they were back then. I ended up going to a show in, I think, 1999. And it was in Queens, and I saw some crazy shit. I thought I was either going to get molested or stabbed. I think that's the overall legacy of ECW. Great promotion. Again, it's funny that TNA and Ring of Honor have been around longer in terms from when they opened, when they started, from when they closed.
Really?
Well, technically, Ring of Honor has been open longer than WCW.
Huh.
So you figure Ring of Honor started in 2002, 2017, 15 years. WCW started in 1988 and ended in 2001.
Damn.
Yeah, right? That's crazy, right? You think about it. We are officially running out of time. Officially running out of time. And this is our premiere edition of Retro Wrestling Game Spotlight. Again, some of the matches that you saw on the screen were as follows. You saw Steve Corino taking on Justin Credible. You saw Shane Douglas take on Too Cold Scorpio. You saw the Sandman take on Mikey Whipwreck. You saw Taz versus Sabu. And you saw Tommy Dreamer taking on Raven. So, we're using the WWE 2k17. This is my first foray into 2k17. We also have the 1983 project. Our next show will be live from Tokyo, Japan. It'll be a New Japan show. So, for